2, 1. John Bell, award-winning Director of ADG Architects, who specialise in building care homes. Welcome to the Care Home Show.
Thank you very much. Nice to speak to you, Simon.
It's good to have you on the show. For the audience's benefit, so we've known each other for quite a while, and I'd say that we've got a solid relationship built on a passion for the care home sector, but then also meeting up every now and then, going for a beer and putting the world to right. So, albeit there won't be any beer today, as we'll be recording. Well, we are recording first thing in the morning. I'm just looking forward to having a good catch up with you, mate. So it's great to be on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, no, you're right. It's been too long.
It has been too long, and I mean, let's face it. By the way the world's going at the moment, it probably will be a while until we get to go for a real pint. So yeah, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future. But for the moment, let's enjoy the podcast. So
yeah, good.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background for the audience's benefit, and also a little bit about the awards that you've won, because you've won some quite prestigious awards over the years?
Yeah, so I've been running an architect's practice in the northeast of England now for getting up towards 15 years, and we've been specialising in the care sector for as long as I can remember. So the practice itself's 35 years old, and as long as I've been in the company, we've been working in the care sector. And in 2010, I think it was 2009-10, we were shortlisted for the PINDERs, and then we actually won the PINDERs for I think it was my third time trying, so third time lucky. I won it 2019 with the Riverside in Ware for Cairn Homes, which was, pretty, I was very pleased. It was nice to finally win it. And then again, we got shortlisted this year, again, with another project. And we're currently collating 2 or 3 other applications right now for this year's entry. So fingers crossed, you never know, it might be there next year, although let's hope it's a slightly better environment than it was this year. It's a bit of a strange environment this year with the impact of COVID sort of just coming to full force, shall we say? So yeah, but it's been a good few years for us, and I enjoy it. I really enjoy the care sector, and I'm finding it's really changing now. It's so different how over the last 5 years, the rooms are increasing size, providing more homely environments, and it's just a different world we live in now. And I think, from back on the COVID, I know that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. Again, that has impact. The one thing I would say about the care sector is it's constantly changing and constantly moving, and all the operators are looking for different ideas and different ways to make their homes stand out from competition, or provide better care, or provide staff with better accommodation. It's constantly moving entity, and I think it's sort of very unusual that in architecture, a lot of the stuff we do, schools, industrial, they're very, very repetitive, but in care, it's very, very led by pushing the boundaries, I would say. So yeah, no, it's been an interesting few years. So.
That's really good to hear, actually, because I think the care sector often gets a bit of a bad rap for maybe being not as innovative as it could be, and in a lot of ways it's kind of got this kind of antiquated perception, if you will. So getting to hear about the fact that from an architectural perspective and from a build perspective that we're undergoing evolution all the time, and that we're always looking for ways to improve. That is really, really good to hear. So. On a personal level, tell me a little bit about your approach and your architectural philosophy, if you like, so that people can kind of get a feel for your own personal worldview, if you like, when it comes to architecture.
Yeah, so we work on projects from right at the start, literally from very much a sketch scheme on a site all the way through. And what I've got very different opinions to what some of the clients have and so forth, but what I'm finding now is, because we're pushing the boundaries of design, and because we're pushing what we're trying to do and be different and innovative, that the costs are just escalating, and it's a case of understanding. And I suppose my philosophy on it is, is I think about getting the balance right in design, and that's what I try and focus on. I deal with all clients at different ends of the spectrum, right down from the smaller homes right up to the bigger homes to the care villages, and you have to deal with each client on its own merit. And I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things, that one of my biggest strengths is when I look at a site, I look at it individually. I look at how that operator wants to operate, and I try and influence them, and they try and influence me, the providers, with, and it's a good sort of backward and forward on ideas. I'm never one of these people that just sort of sits back and sort of just takes what they say for granted. We try and discuss it, and working with the clients is the most important part of what we do. I've done it, worked with past where some of the clients we work with just haven't shown an interest in the design, and they just basically want to get the buildings up and quick, and it's almost like a mass production. And you have those clients, but I would say 90% of my clients now are really heavily involved in design, and we push for that all the way through. We want to sit down with them, we want to have team meetings where have meetings with operations, we have meetings with the managing directors, all the way down to some of the employees, the site managers, the people that are maintaining the site, and getting all their ideas. And I would say over the last 5 years, it's really, really interesting how everyone views different things. So within an organisation, everyone's viewing home very, very differently. Like, the site managers looking at how to maintain the building, how to maintain the outsides and the gardens, and the operations are looking about speed, about which they can get about the buildings. But then you've got the owners of the companies, the managing directors and CEOs of the companies that are looking about how to differentiate their product or how to evolve their product into better than the one they did previously. So it's always a constant moving beast, but I'm really, really enjoying it at the moment. It's really exciting. But yeah, my philosophy is very much like, what do I think what everyone's doing is right? No, I have my own opinions, and I think some of those opinions are very much led more along the lines of looking at the care side of it. I think sometimes we do a lot of these things within the homes that aren't necessarily needed for the care, but they are needed for the comfort of the residents. And I think it's about the idea these homes still have to be sold to people and still have to provide a homely environment. And I think it's about getting that balance right about how that's going to work. But yeah, it's an interesting time, definitely.
One of the things that I've always appreciated about your approach is the fact that you have a great understanding of the operations of a care home business. When we've chatted about things before, you've surprised me on a number of different occasions because of your depth of understanding and appreciation for the way that it all works. Now, I don't know many architects as well as I know you, but I probably hazard a guess to say that that maybe that level of appreciation isn't there, because you do have quite deep and quite technical understanding of what goes on in a care home. And I think that's really, really key as well, because if you don't have that, how are you going to build it into the design? How are you going to make sure that the environment works so that it's fit for purpose from an operational standpoint, from an environmental perspective? And of course, now obviously the big thing that everyone's going to be talking about increasingly is going to be infection control. Not like it wasn't important before, but it is certainly going to be the one of the really key things moving forward as we enter into this kind of not post-COVID world, but I mean, obviously, hopefully we'll get there one day, but the kind of the new world in which we live at the moment, where COVID is, it's just a part and parcel with today as we live as humans, whether we're living in care homes or whether we're kind of living elsewhere. So I'd be interested to hear, okay, so I speak to an awful lot of operators. I probably speak to somewhere between about 10 and about 30 managing directors or CEOs or and kind of different people from different walks of life within the care world. And I think one of the big things that people talk about just repeatedly at the moment is around families visiting residents, and just how do you provide protection in doing so. I'd love to get your take on from a design perspective and just from your own insights perspective on how best that can be managed in this new world.
Yeah, it really is. This is one of the trickiest areas right now. Understanding COVID. I think you've also got to look at it and think it's not just COVID, it's a pandemic. It's, fingers crossed we will get a vaccination or something that will track and trace this, what's going on in the next, I'd like to say 6 months, but who knows? But hopefully we'll get it sooner rather than later. But it's more a case about future-proofing the homes, because what happens if this happens again? And how do we design against that? And I think the first 2 or 3 months of the lockdown period, I think the operators were very much trying to understand the implications. And I think the government, I've spoken to a number of operators like yourself, and I think the information coming back from the government was so convoluted and so inaccurate that it really, really put them in a position where they didn't know whether they were coming or going. They didn't know what they could do. And when you come to COVID and design, you're right, there's a few items that I would sort of really picked up on. And one of them is families and residents. It's mental health issues. If your family cannot come and see their loved ones, their mum, their dad, their auntie, their uncle, their grandparents, that has major implications on all the family members, not just the resident of the care home, but also the people that want to come and visit. And we've been looking at this now for 2 or 3 months on a few projects, how we can start to integrate. And it's really interesting because I think it's pushing the boundaries of design, pushing the operators to think about it. And I think that's what we're very good at in this sector. We're very much a case of pushing the boundaries of what we do. So right now we are looking at one of the operators that we've worked with. They did this off their own back. It's not really architectural, but it's a great thought. It's to introduce outside garden spaces. And I know it's something we spoke about, Simon. Just literally sort of like a summer house place where we can get one in that allows people to come into the space, and then the resident can come into the same space, but there's a separation within. It's a difficult environment to understand, particularly if those residents have dementia, but it's a way of interaction, social interaction, which is really, really important. But then what we're also now doing in design is we're starting to think, well, okay, the summer house is a great fix quickly because we need to get it done quickly. But we're now looking at how we can introduce rooms in the home that have a multi-function, have a multi-use purpose. Because if and when we get this fixed for COVID, who's to say that we don't sort of have nothing for the next 10 years? So there's no point in creating a COVID-19 room. Sorry, I've just realised my emails just keep clicking up in the background. I don't know if you can hear that.
No, okay.
But yeah, there's no point having a COVID-19 free room, because we need to be thinking about future-proofing and flexibility. So we're now looking at multi-use rooms. So private dining is a great example of a room that has been around for 10 years. Everybody does them now, and it's a really interesting concept. But the reality is they get used. Various clients use them 1 or 2 times a month. Some clients might use them 1 or 2 times a week. But it's a room that doesn't get used. And it's a room that, in theory, probably costs 20 square metres times by 20, about £40,000 to put into a room. So, £4,000, sorry, £4,000 to put into a home. And it doesn't get used that often. So we've got to think about how we can start to use those rooms and make them part of a home with outside access, but also inside access. So it becomes almost like a room where visitors can come in and residents go in, and it's sort of part of the home. But in the flip side of that, and it's a very quick fix. It's a very quick idea of, we can separate that room, put the screen up, and it gives you the flexibility. So that's the short-term idea, is that we try and create a room with flexibility. But I think the longer-term goals we've got to look at is, how do we start to design so that we start to take into account that in the height of the pandemic, how are we going to deal with it? As you said there, you've got families and visitors. We need to get those. The biggest problem is actually getting visitors into the home, because they're not allowed to move around. The government's telling you to stay at home. So again, that's a difficult concept to understand. So we need to start to introduce a lot more interaction in IT facilities, social media, a bit like what we're doing now, almost creating potentially IT rooms. This is me just thinking, I'll be pretty honest, this is not anything I've discussed with operators, but I think we need to start thinking about this. now, and I'm just literally thinking off the top of my head about how we could do that. And I think, again, we need to create rooms within homes where you could have this ability to talk to your family via screens, but not just on a small laptop or an iPad, and actually a decent size interactive screen. And those are sorts of ideas. But I think we've got to take design further with the COVID or with pandemic, and it's got to be segregation. We've got to look at smaller units. 15 years ago, we were building homes of 100 beds, 120 beds. Then all of a sudden, we've been going through the last 10 years where we've been doing 60 to 80 beds. Anything above 80 was too big, anything below 60 was too small. 60 to 80 was the optimum level. Now all of a sudden, those 80s are now getting pushed up to 90s and 100s again. And it's a case of, is that feasible? Is it worthwhile doing it? And I think the answer is there's no right or wrong, but I think what we need to start to do is look at how we can provide segregation within the homes. So in the event that we get residents that are asymptomatic, or they have come down with COVID, then we can isolate them in a comfortable environment without taking them out of the home. And I think that's really important to do. So I think we've got to start looking at the smaller units. I think there's been a common theme where we sort of look between 10, 15, 18 bed units. But I think if we start to look at maybe keep those size units, that's fine, but also maybe have a slightly smaller set of units as well, so that in the event these things start to move around again, we've got residents that can be isolated. And I think, again, those are sort of the things we're looking at. It's, again, secondary entrances. Instead of having everyone filter through the main entrance, what about secondary entrances? We've got staff entrances, but they're usually located on the back. How do we segregate staff from residents, from the visitors? It's an absolute minefield, Simon. It really is. But again, it's just understanding how we deal with this, because track and trace is useful, but it's not solving all the problems, because the testing isn't really 100%. I speak to loads of operators on this. I was with an operator yesterday, and I asked the question, about how does testing work? Because I've got one of my members of staff. He lives at home with his mum and dad. They've come back from Spain. He's like, well, do I self-isolate? Do I stay at home? So, well, you probably should stay at home if they're coming back from Spain. But they've all been tested and testing positive. And the question was, can he come back to work now because he's tested positive? And the answer was, well, he's tested positive at that moment in time. It doesn't mean that I think it's understanding that as well. So, yeah, it really is interesting. And I think this is the problem. The next pandemic, touch wood, isn't for a long time. It could be something totally different. Someone I was talking to, a friend actually, and they were a doctor, and they were saying actually COVID-19, obviously it's not a nice disease, but it's the perfect, a nice virus, but it's the perfect virus. It goes undetected for 4 to 5 days, so you could have it for 4 to 5 days without detection. So from a point of view on a virus, it is, what the class is a perfect virus, because it transmits and it passes to different people without people knowing they've got it. Then it sort of explodes into, the symptoms. And I think that, so again, it's understanding that and how we can deal with that. But I think we just need to, and that's where it really is interesting times. And I think operators are now, you've got 2 or 3 operators that are really pushing the market. And then you've got 2 or 3 operators that are just starting to get their head above the parapet again, because of what's happened. The other issues that we're probably going to venture on to is how do you get, when residents pass away, which is a natural occurrence in a care home, that's this end of life care, people are passing away regularly. How do you start to get new residents filtered back into the home? And again, I think that has been one of the biggest impacts on the operators, is the fact that they haven't been able to take new residents in, or they haven't been able to take residents from the NHS, or if they have, they haven't. The number of times I've been told that we've had a COVID outbreak, and it's because someone has released a patient from a hospital or from and they've come in with COVID, and the testing hasn't been correctly done. Now, I don't truly understand the procedures involved, but that just needs to, we need to look at that and how we can better integrate that. And that again comes back to design. There is the smaller units where you almost have like an isolation hub of 8 beds, where if someone's coming into the home and to live, they're then isolating in that home for 14 days. So you're controlling their environment for 14 days. So they're coming in, the home feels exactly like everywhere else. So it's a smaller part of the home. They can be tracked and they can be tested regularly. And then they can be allowed to sort of, eventually after the 14-day isolation period, they can move in. And the good thing is about that, it's not wasting money by building isolation. You can just create an 8-bed unit or a 10-bed unit, but it sort of allows you to control that process and making sure that the existing residents in the home aren't going to be potentially impacted by new residents. And I think, and again, avoiding staff crossover, making sure staff work in the zones and they're not, we've, again, issues with cross-site working, clients telling me about staff that go to different sites across the country, and they've got 2 or 3 different homes and adventure in different, and I've had 4 meetings in the last 2 weeks cancelled because there's been a COVID outbreak. So it's just, and it's going to be that, and you just accept it. It is what it is. But I think it's definitely interesting times. I mean, I'm enjoying it as an idea of growth for myself, and also understanding how we can tackle this and how we can come out of this better. And I think one thing's for sure, there's the care sector is starting to get the recognition that it deserves. It's not getting fully recognised, but it is starting to get recognised. I think the clapping for carers is sort of starting to put the sector back in the government's eye line, and I think that's really important, because I think for so many years we're just sort of in the background and not a lot's happening. And I think that, I know you're a big advocate of that, Sam. I see your posts a lot, and I know you've been speaking to a lot of people on that. And I think that's, again, something else that is hopefully a positive that's going to come out of this negative. We're going, the COVID's a terrible thing, and we'll come together as a community, as a nation, to sort of tackle it. But I would say, it's also bringing to the forefront, just how good the NHS is, just how good our carers are and operators are. And I think we need to develop that and grow that even more than we are doing at the moment, just to make sure that the government don't just brush us under the carpet.
I guess
they're gonna. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that it's a really, really key point, isn't it? I think one of the big things that everyone's really conscious of is the fact that we're all kind of working out how to do this, right? This is all uncharted territory for everyone. Obviously, we had we've had big flu outbreaks and things in the past, in kind of in living memory, if you like. But this is obviously the most significant virus that we've experienced, and we do hope that the care sector, because of its resilience, because of its unity, because of the way it's held together and in such tumultuous times, really, I think has been really, really impressive. And I think there are definitely green shoots of prosperity from that perspective, but there's still so much work to be done. Coming back to that, or coming back to some of the design elements, we can definitely pick up the profile of the sector part again. But I'm speaking to a lot of people at the moment who they're doing quite big reconfiguration work within their home. So what they're trying to do is to look at their homes or their home and say, okay, so which one of the rooms on the periphery, on the kind of outside of the home's footprint, if you like, how can we then turn that into a visiting room if they don't have the either the funds available to build one of these outdoor cabins, or maybe just because of the layout of the plot of land where the home is, it's just more practical to be able to go and do that. I'm presuming that's something that you're hearing about time and time again, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think some operators are looking at it very differently. I think some operators are looking at this as a temporary fix, temporary solution. And I think it is a room that's needed, but you've got to be careful about just taking a room and sort of splitting it up and understanding how that works, because you've got to still have the segregation. So, and I think that's really important to understand how that works. I'm finding more operators now are focusing on providing something like a summer house and providing a room within the home that can be isolated or track. And I think they're trying to control it that way. Because I think the other thing that people are looking at is, in 6 months' time, it may take them 2 or 3 months to get this resolved, and then you've got, in 6 months' time, that room no longer has a function or purpose.
Mm.
And I think it's about understanding that, where a summer house can be used by the residents in the summer, obviously, but also any other rooms and things like this. If you start taking bedrooms out of the equation, that's quite a large chunk of profit. So it's not just about the builder's work. You're actually losing a bedroom, and at the end of the day, they are businesses, and it does come down to numbers. So I've not heard a lot of that, I'll be brutally honest. And what I have heard a lot of is, when we're looking at designs going forward on future design, that we incorporate a room that can be very quickly converted into a segregation room. So it literally, within a week, a wall is put up with a screen, and you've got outside access and inside access.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Again, and that's what I'm finding more of. I think people with it's going to be an interesting time as well, because you've also got the older homes, the 30, 40 bed homes, the homes run by a single home operator. It's going to be very difficult for them if they're getting impacted by COVID. I think that's where the market that's what a lot of people believe the market's going to change, is that the smaller homes are going to struggle. The bigger homes will be able to survive and go through, because the bigger, they can segregate a lot easier, they can isolate certain areas, where the smaller homes are usually old manor houses or townhouses with extension upon extension upon extension. And to get those off is very, very difficult. And I think they're the ones that are going to fail a bit, not fail, that's the wrong word, struggle, and to be able to survive through this. And I think also a lot of people are going to lose a lot of appetite to move forward. I think you'll find, I think there'll be quite a number of smaller operators leave the market.
Mm.
And I think those smaller operators, I think they'll leave the market, and I think you'll find that, it'll become the big operators that we all deal with and work with. I know you deal with a lot of them, Simon. I think they'll start to fill the gaps and become a much more professional than they currently are, because the smaller homes are usually run by little small families, and they become much more of a family business rather than a corporate business, if that makes sense.
Mm.
But in relation to the design, I think we are finding things that, come back to your comment on the changes of internal buildings. I think we are starting to look a little bit more at the outside spaces, about how we can sort of separate the outside spaces as well, so we can create spaces in the gardens for residents to come into as well. So looking at access into the site, making sure we can isolate that and give people space within the garden where they can come in. So, the last few days has been great when it's been absolutely red hot. So, residents can come in and meet the families, and that's one thing we have started to look at a little bit. But again, it's one thing I'd say at the moment. More people seem to be focusing on how they can develop the new builds rather than converting the existing build, even if those existing builds are only a year old. I think they're sort of accepting that they are what they are, and to start impacting them massively, it's very difficult to do. I think it's simple fixes, and I think the summer house is a very simple, good fix, because gardens are, the garden spaces now that people have are usually fairly large, so and manageable, and plus the car parks are too.
So you'd say there's more a trend towards the summer houses, so the kind of visiting cabins, rather than reconfiguration, just because of the kind of the nature of it means that it has kind of greater purpose and is maybe a more cost-effective way to do it in the long run.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. It's we we got approached by one of our clients about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, possibly, and they were one of the first to do it. And it was, I'd love to say it was my idea, but it wasn't. It was their idea. They were looking at how they could get residents into the home, and it was a great idea. I can't say anything other than that. It was a case of they want residents to meet the families. It's not just about health, it's about mental health as well. It's about not being able to see people's families has a big impact. And I think the operator I was working with there was just came up with this idea, and very quickly like, can you do the X, Y, and Z for us? Can you put? We want to send out a mark. Again, it's a bit of publicity, but again, it was a good thing because they're showing thinking outside the box really quickly and how they can grow their business and how they can say, look, we're doing this to come, to allow families to meet the residents, see their family members, and it was great. And yeah, and they've now done it at every single home. They've done it at every single home, and they've bought. But it sounds like, but it's such a good idea because it's a no-brainer. Because what it does is it can be used again. So even if they stop using it for a COVID room, they can still use it for a summer house, and it's still a nice space. And I think so it has dual function. So it was a very clever idea, that one. I think started to change buildings in rooms. I think what you'd find is in a year's time, those rooms will be converted back. So it's a bit of it doesn't really have the flexibility. It's about, and I think that's why people are focusing on the existing buildings, are very much focusing on what they can do with the spaces around the building or within the building if it's possible, but more so they're focusing on the new builds going forward, making them that they are future proof. So the conversion that you're talking about in existing buildings, that exists already, that room's there. It's like, yeah, this is a room, it's currently a multi-use room. We use it for private dining, we use it as a therapy, we use it for library, but we also use it potentially as a COVID room or a pandemic room or a visitors room or a family room. So it's and I think that's definitely one way we're going with the sector.
And that will be, I guess, in the context of what you were talking about earlier on around like the private dining rooms and things, just making sure that the space is properly utilised. Obviously, it's not cheap to build a care home. You want efficiency in the build and things, and you want that space to be used as much as possible, so that people have got as many different choices as possible. So, being able to have that flexibility in future designs for stuff that's being built at the moment. Or I guess some people that can do the reconfiguration side of things, but I guess, as you say, that's quite difficult, quite costly, and if it isn't designed with that kind of flexibility in mind, then again, it could be just another kind of underutilized space.
I love a private dining room. I love a private dining room. They're just great. It's just like you walk into a home, it's like, yeah, there's your private dining room. It's like, and I just think it looks amazing. They always look amazing, but it feels a bit. I know there's a couple of operators that use it well and they think about how it's going to be used. But the private dining room for me, in probably 60-70% of the homes, is just there as a sales feature. And but the 30 or 40% of the homes that do use it well. And it's a good idea. They'll have staff members will have meet the manager meals, or they'll have residents, they'll have a meal in there because it's the birthday, and they really use it. But it's when I walk into a home, and I can see it straight away. You walk into a home, and it's set up specifically as a private dining. It's right in the entrance area, and it's just a bit like, yeah, it's just a sales feature, that one.
Yeah,
that never gets used. And I always ask the question, how often does it get used? And they always say, yeah, I think it's been 2 times this year. All right, okay, and it's October. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
it's a shame, isn't it? Where like, I mean, we both have a shared passion for food. When we go for a beer, we usually go and grab some nice dinner and things as well. When that's such an important part of our social life as humans, it's a shame to hear that that's often so underutilized. But I mean, I hear similar things as well, and it's not a surprise that it's used as kind of a sales tool. What's been interesting is I know a handful of people that have bought the visiting cabins, and because they've been savvy about the approach, not only have they bought it, but they've also gone gone down the line as well of really promoting the fact that they've got it. So you can, it's again, this is broadly a sales tool, but whilst occupancy is obviously a really, really big challenge, I think it's a very sensible thing to do. They've let the local newspapers know that they've got this fantastic visiting cabin and things like that. They've created some nice content around it and things as well. And whilst at the consumer end of the spectrum, people are hesitating. They're worried about great Aunt Agatha moving into a home because they're not going to be able to, or potentially they won't be able to see them. To know that the operators are, or at least some operators are, taking a forward-thinking approach to this and thinking, okay, so people are going to need to see their families. How are people for them to be able to see that how operators are creating safe environments for them to visit their family members? That makes an awful lot of sense to me, because if I were a consumer, I'd want to know that I could spend good quality time with great Aunt Agatha, whomever it might be, because to your point, the mental health implications of not is huge. Loneliness and isolation, particularly in older people, is a huge predetermining factor to their overall health and well-being. But you mentioned it as well earlier. It's the families who are impacting just as much as anyone else. If you're used to seeing your grandma once a week, or maybe even more if they live kind of close enough to be able to go and do that, and then that gets restricted and taken away from you, that's not going to make you feel. It's not going to make you feel good. So I think these innovations, these forward-thinking thoughts, some of them are simple and that you can kind of you can throw together relatively easily, like the drive-by visits and things, all the way through to kind of the more technical stuff and more expensive stuff, obviously, where people are having to factor all this stuff into their builds. It's all important stuff, and I guess the key thing to remember with all of this is the fact that we don't know what the outcome of this is all going to be. Are we going to find a vaccine? I mean, we hope we will, but we don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case. This might just be something that we have to we factor it in, and it's just another type of virus that we just have to live with, that we don't ever get rid of. Which, I mean, obviously, let's hope that that's not the case. But as much as I think everyone's learning and evolving and becoming better at just operating in this new world, we don't know what the future has to hold yet. So it's just something that we all need to be really conscious of.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think, what we found design-wise, it's a case of most of the operators do it anyway, but it's about little things, little tweaks, and like getting residents to meet families, make sure residents are safe, making sure that COVID can be or a pandemic or a virus can be segregated very quickly, so it doesn't impact the overall home. But what I have, I've done quite a bit of research on this, and it's other little things. It's unbelievable because it's surface spread of the disease. That's one of the biggest issues with this. I know we're all wearing masks now, but you can't ask residents to start wearing masks. You can't ask staff to wear masks. It's supposed to be a homely environment. You don't wear a mask at home, but what we've got is surface spread of this virus, and also materials. So now I'm looking into different materials. This is something that I'm sort of speaking to other clients on, looking into, and I believe, and I don't know how true it is, but I was talking to a client the other day of saying, is it copper or brass doesn't transfer the virus as much or at all as other metals do? And I thought that's a really interesting idea that we're starting to look at. So, how we're building these buildings now as well. So we've gone through the 2 or 3 month cycle of, right, what can we do with the designs to try and future-proof them? And it is about getting visitors, and it is about getting the interaction, and it is about segregation. And there are technologies out there, and it is about making sure staff are sensible, because staff leave the homes and go home and maybe go to the supermarket, so they're potentially going to be looking to bring the virus in as well. But let's start looking about how we can sort of stop the transfer of the virus across surfaces, because that's going to be where the biggest problem is. You said there 2 minutes ago that hopefully we'll get rid of this virus. COVID-19 has been around for years. It's been around for a very long time, and we won't get rid of it. We may get a vaccination for it, or we may get a virus, but I can't believe we'll get something that will get rid of it totally. It's a flu virus. So all we'll have is some vaccinations and virus to control it. So it's going to be with us for a long time. So again, we need to understand how this virus works and how it's getting transmitted. So I think looking at materials. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting concept about the materials, the metal, the different types of metal, how surface transfer. So again, we can start to introduce that. So you might have something simple like door handles to all the bedrooms. Could be brass or there could be copper. But again, it's just understanding which materials work better, because you may find some materials transmit it quicker and or retain it longer. I think that's probably the key. Again, sanitization, making sure that places are regularly cleaned down. And that's how we're going to prevent this spread, is making sure that, you know, the sanitization is so much better than it used to be. And I'll be really honest, in a care home, it was pretty good anyway. But we need to take up another level. It's daft. Well, we need to do that. And I think, again, just like hand wash facilities in areas, sanitization facilities, when you're coming into the home, sanitization straight away. You're not, you know, questions, almost like an interview room before you start to come into the home. And again, it's all these little things. And yeah, it's just interesting to sort of delve deeper now. So we've looked at the design, now we're looking at how we construct them. And I think that's the process as well. And also we've got to be careful, we've got to look at how the construction process is going to be impacted by this. That's a major, you know, the contractors worked, most of them have worked all the way through. The issue they've had is 2 metre separation. So you've gone from having 100 people on the site to 50 people on the site. So it's impacting the times of the builds of these projects, and also having people working on the homes in, you know, even existing homes. So again, we're still in this very much early stages about how it's sort of pushed on. And I think what would be useful is maybe we do another podcast in 6 months or a year's time to sort of see how we have done it. Because right now we're in the midst of it, and I'm learning all the time, like you do, Simon. You speak to people, you speak to clients, you're speaking to everyone, understanding how they're dealing with it. And it's really, really interesting because everyone's got a different idea. And everyone's doing different research. And I think, you know, looking, and I thought it was the first I heard about different materials it was beginning of the week, and I was just like, yeah, that's a really interesting concept. Is that something we should be looking into? And it is. And, you know, technologies as well. You know, again, we're using CCTV around the homes a lot more. Obviously, CCTV has to be signed off by residents' families, but it's there to protect them. And again, if it potentially allows people to keep an eye on the homes and manage the homes, but what we need to be doing is making sure we don't take CCTV and start to use it as a tool to stop social interaction. You know, we need to maintain social interaction, because that is the best thing for everyone. You know, maintaining people's well-being and looking after them, making sure they're allowed to be interactive with people. And, you know, we don't want CCTV to overrule us. So again, it's getting the balance right. And I think that, again, is something that we're working with operators about, understanding how we can use that system. We can use the different technologies out there. So nice, but yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Definitely interesting times, eh? Well, look, I love the idea of doing another episode in about 6 months' time. I think that makes a lot of sense. We are in this phase at the moment where we're still just voraciously trying to learn as much about this stuff as humanly possible. So no, it's been great having you on the show, John. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, let's get that next podcast booked.
Yeah, no, definitely sounds good.
Good stuff. Cheers, John.
Cheers. See you later.